The staffing shortage is a major issue right now. I guess from the lawyer perspective, it's difficult to get through to clients to use the phone because due to the staffing shortage, they're having to lock the inmates in their cells more, especially on the weekends. Typically, they get locked in for 2 days at a time, and if the inmates are locked in, then they need a staff escort to be able to use the phone. Then they also need a staff escort to do visits. So most inmates haven't had, I think there's been no visits for the last 6 weeks. Most inmates have only had about 3 visits with their family since May. There's also been long periods of time where they get no phone access at all. So there's been, I think, several 6-day periods where they weren't able to call their lawyer, call family members. I mean, it's isolating enough being in jail, but not being able to talk to anybody. It's been really bad for them that way. It has limited lawyer visits to HMP because we obviously need escorts to go to certain parts of the building when we go in there. And if there's no staff available, then we actually can't visit our clients.
I want to get back to sort of the human rights issues with all of that, but there's also been talk of rodent issues in the building. Can you kind of explain what you've heard from clients or what you've seen in court decisions about that?
The rodents are really bad at HMP right now. It's the worst it's ever been. It's always been bad, and there's always a smell when you go into HMP. And it's really dead rats in the walls. And the smell is actually so bad that when you go visit, like oftentimes you want to go home and shower after. People around the office will kind of tell you that you stink. But what's actually going on with the rodents, there's a complete infestation. It was originally just in the SHU, the special handling unit on the bottom, but now it's spread throughout the prison. There's rodents on all units. I've had at least 2 clients that have been bitten by mice, which is, this day and age completely unacceptable. And there's also a problem with silverfish, a small insect, and there's a bad infestation of them as well.
What about recreation time? You need prison guards to do everything in a prison to get from point A to point B. I assume if they're not getting calls or they're not getting family visits, I assume they're not doing much outside time.
Yes, my clients have advised me that they've only had rec about once. They're getting rec about once every 3 weeks. And this summer they've only been actually outside of the building once.
So when you look at the totality of all this, I mean, how is it able to continue to be running? And maybe you're not the right person to ask that, but from a human rights standpoint, how is this able to continue?
That's a great question. I have no idea. Right now, the conditions there, I mean, they're horrible for staff too. I mean, it's a horrible place to work and nobody should have to work in those conditions. But for the prisoners, I mean, it's completely inhumane. It's inexcusable that that's going on right now.
How is this trickling down to the justice system and how this affects sentencing?
Judges have been taking this into account, and you can get what's called a Duncan credit, which allows for enhanced credit for remand time. So typically, if someone does remand time before they're sentenced, they get time and a half, so 1.5 days for every day served. Right now, defense lawyers can make what's called a Duncan application and can ask for increased credit, which typically would give them 2 to 1 for time served. So judges are allowing that more and more frequently, and I guess it's kind of gone up and down with COVID. During COVID, it was allowed initially due to COVID lockdowns. Then the court said, well, just COVID isn't just a good enough reason to give more credit. But now it's swinging back the other way because the conditions at HMP are so bad that judges are giving enhanced credit just due to the heat in general in the building. The heat down there is unbearable. There's no ventilation. And because of, we've seen enhanced credit for mice bites, for lack of recreation, but also it's affecting medical care. Their ability to take people to the hospital. It's also affected their ability to give programming, which is another big problem. Part of the purpose of prison is rehabilitation. And right now, due to staff shortages, there's not much programming either, as due to lockdowns, they don't have the ability to escort the people coming in to give the programs and even supervise the inmates taking the programs. So programming is also being affected. So the courts have recognized that and are giving them more credit to make up for that.